Hello everybody and welcome to this video about DevOps Foundations. Today we're going to be talking about what DevOps is and defining the actual term. We're also going to be talking a little bit about what it means to kind of implement DevOps and why it's important to implement it in your projects and your companies. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the reality of DevOps right now in our technical community at the moment. So thank you very much for joining me today. And let's get straight into it. Let's define the term DevOps. So, what does DevOps actually mean? What does it actually mean, in terms of how we use the term and what it means for software engineering and software delivery? So DevOps is a set of principles, it's a culture and a philosophy that guides a complete development team. That development team works towards a global business goal and enables themselves to create fast flow and feedback through the technology value stream. So let me pull up a diagram for you which really demonstrates this capability for us. So I love to use this diagram when I talk about the definition of DevOps. So what we can see here is a full application flow. A workflow that a standard application would go through from the planning phase of business conception, where someone initially gets an idea in order to actually build the application and code, test, build, etc., all the way to actually deploying that application and monitoring it in the cloud or wherever you're deploying it, maybe into an on-premise system as well. Where does this fit inside of the definition of DevOps? In our definition, we had a few keywords that were a part of it. Let me bring up the definition for you here. So what does a complete development team mean? A complete development team is actually people from each part of the application workflow. So you've got people, business analysts from the planning side who kind of translate those business requirements into technical capabilities. We've got developers who work on the actual coding and the building side of it. We've got testers, QAs, who work on the actual testing of the application and making sure that the application is of the right quality. And then we've got release managers and operations people who deal with the actual deployments and the operations and the monitoring of the applications. And a complete development team is usually where we have a team which is completely cross-functional. So we have members from each part of that application workflow working together as an independent team to deliver applications to the customer, to the clients, whoever their target audience might be. The next thing that we want to talk about is a global business goal. What does this mean? In a traditional sense, what you'd have is the developers, they want to build as many features as they can. The testers, they want to be able to ensure that the application is of the highest quality possible. And the ops people, the operations, they want to ensure that production is stable, reliable, and resilient against any attacks from external systems. But these are all three separate different goals. And this starts to actually tear the project in different directions. So we actually want to define a global business goal for the whole development team and the whole application lifecycle. So each member of the team, therefore, is working towards the same aim in total. That all of their work is going towards achieving this one goal. And by doing so, this gives the team a sense of direction and means that they are constantly motivated to perform to the best of their ability. Another one of the key words that we talked about in our definition is fast flow and feedback loops. And I want to save this just for one moment because we'll come back to it later on in the video. And finally, the last thing that we need to talk about in our definition of DevOps is the technology value stream. And I've got a book here called the DevOps Handbook, which I really love the way that they talk about this particular concept. So let me read it out for you. In DevOps, we typically define our technology value stream as the process required to convert a business hypothesis into a technology-enabled service that delivers value to the customer. It's really simply put here the way that we're able to actually go through this whole application workflow that we've been talking about whilst we've been defining DevOps. That's all of those steps. That is what makes up the technology value stream. So we've defined DevOps, and we talked about all of the key words in the part of this definition and how working in a complete development team in a DevOps situation enables that team to work towards a business goal, and they're able to create this fast flow and feedback loops throughout their technology value stream. So we didn't touch on the fast flow and feedback. So let's explore this idea a little bit more now. The DevOps principles. I like to refer to these 3 principles of DevOps as the 3 Fs. 1, flow. 2, feedback. And 3, faster. The first thing that we need to do in our DevOps projects is that we actually need to create flow through the technology value stream. That means that we need to have some way where we're able to take tickets or items or ideas that come from the business, convert them into a technology-enabled service or technical requirement in this case, and then to be able to actually deliver that to the customers. Now, obviously, that's a one-directional flow through the system and the technology value stream. And this is the first thing that we do in our projects, to create that flow. And sometimes we can do it optimized as well. We can speed it up as much as possible. We can look for ways that we can use automation in testing, automation in deployments, and then we can actually have a robust and rigorous way to deploy applications and changes and features to the customers. Second, in this 3 Fs principles, feedback. In order to understand whether the customers feel that the features are relevant for them, we need to be able to get their feedback. Now, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? It means that we need to be able to create a feedback loop from the customers into the business. And this is where we get to that point where we're actually saying, yes, the business requirements are now being defined by the customers, because we're able to actually understand, really truly get into the head of our customers and understand how they think, what they feel like, what they do. And finally, probably one of the most important parts of DevOps is faster. How can we do this to its most optimized way? And so we take this principle of feedback and we apply it to all of the aspects of our technology value stream. So now we've created a feedback loop from ops to dev, for example. And that could manifest in saying, oh, the application is really underperforming. It's suffering from performance issues. When we've got 1 million users hitting the website or the web application, we're finding that it's crashing or it's not responding so well. And these bits of code need to be optimized. So that might be some feedback from the ops team to the devs team. Or we might find that the testers, they need to feedback into the ops team. Maybe they can use some resources in how they're able to automate their tests in some way. They might want another environment specifically for testing different features of the applications. And so we'll work with the ops team to try to get them to understand how they can optimize their particular workflow in a certain way. And then when we start to create these feedback loops throughout all of the aspects of the technology value stream, we actually start to have this done in a lot faster way. These smaller feedback loops means that we can deliver value to the customers at a much higher quality as well. So these are the 3 principles of DevOps. Flow, how to get something from the business requirements delivered down to the customers. Feedback, first of all, create one feedback loop. Get feedback from the customers to influence the way that you're developing your features. And finally, faster. Create lots and lots of small feedback loops inside of your technology value stream to demonstrate how each part of the application lifecycle can influence other parts of the lifecycle. So that's the DevOps principles for you. You can just simply remember the 3 Fs: flow, feedback, and faster. The next thing that we're going to talk about is why DevOps is important. So why would you even want to implement DevOps in the first place? Why would you want to go through all the hassle of trying to change the way that you deliver software, the way that you build software? Why would you want to do this in the first place? This is a common question that we get from our clients when we're working with them. They realize that DevOps is a new trendy thing that they need to explore, but they don't know how and why they need to be doing it in the first place. Today we're going to be discussing 3 reasons why DevOps is important. Now, this isn't going to be an extensive discussion on this particular topic. There are many, many reasons for why DevOps is important, and in particular, you're going to have specific things that you're going to be addressing as problems to actually motivate your implementation of DevOps. But today we're going to discuss 3 things. Now, the first one is you get a complete cross-functional team. This is important because what ends up happening is through knowledge sharing ceremonies such as brown bags or lunch and learns, or even attending conferences together, your team gets an opportunity to learn about other parts of the application lifecycle, and they start to gain skills across the stack. Now, what that means is that they don't become an expert necessarily, and they're able to suddenly, a tester is able to suddenly do the job of an operations person. No, we're not saying that necessarily. But what we are saying is that a tester might be able to understand how an operation person thinks, how they do their work, and they could help that person help the other members of their team to do their work easier. They're able to fulfill their requirements easier because of some other additional features that the tester is doing in the background. Now, maybe it's a case that the tester is going to, they've discovered this new tool for automation, and instead of running the tests in a completely separate environment, they can safely run them together in a development environment, and that's absolutely fine. And so what we'll find is that different parts of the application lifecycle will work together as a completely cross-functional team and gain skills about each part of the application lifecycle. The next thing is something that my mentor constantly talked to me about. It's not a thing. It means that processes in the application lifecycle don't become a big thing. One of the classic examples of this is deploying to production. I remember we were working with one client and they were deploying a new version of their application into the production environment. And so we had to take the whole application down for an overnight period of about 12 hours. And we had to fix a number of things, deploy the new version of the application. And that was a painful experience. We had to all stay up the overnight completely and support them whilst they were doing these deployments and doing any tests as well. And that's not following the DevOps principles. And so what we learned from that experience is that deployments to production should become easy. And this is what DevOps is going to be enabling you to do. When you have fully automated stack, when you have so much automation and controls throughout the application lifecycle, deployments to production are not something that you have to actively think about and plan. They're just a natural thing that happen as a part of the normal working day and the normal day job of everyone in the team. And finally, I think one of the most important parts of DevOps is that you get an empathetic team. Leaders are taught that EQ is better than IQ when they're training and they're becoming a leader themselves and they're growing those qualities. But what about the engineers? What about our own team members? They also need to be developing their EQ. And so when we have an empathetic team which is able to understand the trials and the tribulations, the frustrations of other members of the team, we're actually motivated to work together as a complete development team to solve those issues together. This comes in really nicely with the first point that I was talking about, where we talked about that complete cross-functional team and gaining skills across the complete application lifecycle. And so when we're able to understand the pain points of other members of the team, we might be able to help them out with some of our expertise and knowledge that we have, and our little bit of understanding of what they have as well. So these are the three main reasons why DevOps is important. You're able to have this complete cross-functional team with skills across the application lifecycle. You have processes which are well rehearsed and well defined. And finally, you have an empathetic team where each member is able to understand the pain points of the other members of the team. In working with clients, we sometimes find that it's difficult for them to implement DevOps. And even just working in technical projects at the moment, we sometimes find that people aren't really following the DevOps principles. So what's the reality of the situation right now? It's all good and well that we've talked about these principles, the 3 F's of DevOps, and what DevOps will bring to you and why it's important. But what's the reality right now in our technical community? What we find is that actually DevOps is a role, is a person on your team. And that DevOps expert is really the person who's going to be bringing the capabilities to the table, advising you on how you should be able to do your processes. But they're going to be spending a lot of their time building infrastructure, automating with pipelines and CI/CD. And so they're really working hard to really try to implement DevOps in a practical way. But when we come back to our definition of DevOps, we said that DevOps was a culture, a philosophy, a set of principles. So we find that that's one thing where there's a slight difference. And so as engineers working in this particular space, we need to be working together to try to spread the culture of DevOps as much as possible. The next thing that we find that's quite different between the DevOps ideals and what's happening right now is that we have to support development teams. And so this one engineer or maybe team of DevOps engineers that we have on our projects have to support 30 to 40 developers and testers and business analysts. And so we find that these individuals, they're kind of in a very high pressure situation. They're under a lot of strain and stress sometimes. And so these can be very difficult situations that they need to be able to navigate within their career and within their work that they have to do on a daily basis. What we can do to actually help is actually to expand our circle of concern, expand our knowledge. So maybe we don't have to ask them for support constantly. And maybe we can take up things for ourselves and in our development team, work with them to understand the principles of the infrastructure, the architecture, and all of these other different things, because that might help that one person to just ease off on their work a little bit more. And finally, what do we have to do together as a complete technical community to fill this gap from where DevOps is right now to where we want it to be in terms of a culture and a set of principles and a philosophy to follow on projects? Is that we really need to spread this culture to everybody. Talk about these principles with your colleagues, your project managers. Really help businesses to understand why it's so important to be working together to implement these in our little way. So that's the reality of the situation right now. And we all have a responsibility to be working together to spread this culture and therefore bring about change, so that we can then transform and do better software delivery, do better software engineering, because ultimately it's going to benefit our customers and it's going to benefit us. The last thing that I want to be able to talk about with you today is the practical steps that you can take right now to actually implement these principles and this culture within your projects and within your companies. There are 3 things that I'm going to talk about today, but once again, these are going to be a non-extensive list. There are many, many things based on your specific situations and circumstances that you can implement on your particular level. The first one is collaboration. Maybe it's through mob programming that you can actually work together as a team to solve a problem. Maybe it's a case of getting together in a lunch and learn situation and learning about a new concept. Sharing knowledge empowers the rest of the team to be able to perform those actions. In one project that I'm currently working on at the moment, we make it a point to have at least 2 lunch and learn sessions every 2-week sprint. And therefore, we have our team constantly developing their own skills in presentations and also skills within other DevOps capabilities. And also, their other members of the team are learning about those capabilities and taking them on and saying, oh yeah, I know how to do that because you talked about this in your lunch and learn session, so let me do that instead of asking for your support on it. That's the first thing. Having a forum for which you can actually share knowledge with the rest of the team means that you can have a completely cross-functional development team. The second thing that I want to talk about in terms of the practical steps that you can take to implement this is empathy. Have team building activities. Yes, they can be painful, and yes, they can be cringy sometimes, but these can be some things which are like so simple as just transforming your sprint retrospectives. I believe that sprint retrospectives are probably one of the most important parts of the sprint because it gives us a moment and some time to reflect back on how we've done over the last 2 weeks and then make changes, take actions according to the things that we want to improve and also the things that we want to continue doing better as well. So work together as a team to have those team building activities. Maybe it's just take some time out on a Friday afternoon and do a quiz together, something which gets away from the normal work. And finally, the last point that I want to give you today as a practical way that you can implement DevOps on your teams is knowledge sharing. And I talked a little bit about this in one way that you could do this through collaboration, but I want to expand that to say, go to conferences, expand your knowledge and share that with others. Attend conferences where you're able to expand your capabilities, delve deeper into different aspects of the application lifecycle. Maybe you're interested in how the infrastructure works. Maybe you're interested in how we can apply automation in these certain situations. And so knowledge sharing and knowledge gaining for your own self will only help you to develop better quality applications for your customers. So to summarize this whole video really nicely, I want to bring up all of the topics that we talked about today. So we first defined DevOps and we said that it was a culture, a set of principles, a philosophy that you can follow as a complete development team to enable fast flow and feedback loops in a technology value stream. The second thing that we talked about today was actually defining what fast flow and feedback loops are in the technology value stream and the application lifecycle. So what do they look like? And we talked about the 3 principles, the 3 F's of DevOps: flow, feedback, and faster. The next thing that we talked about was the results, or what would actually happen if you implemented DevOps inside of your projects, inside of your company. And within that, we talked about how you'd have a complete cross-functional development team, you'd be able to have empathy throughout your team, and you'd also have processes which are well-defined and well-rehearsed. It's not a thing. And finally, we talked about the reality of DevOps and what you might be able to do to bring that gap from where it is right now to where it is in terms of its ideals. And we gave you some practical and reasonable steps that you'll be able to take in order to actually achieving this goal of reaching the ideal DevOps implementation. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video and found it educational for you, transformative in some way or another, and we hope to see you soon.